secure shelter. I mean, the difference from somebody, living in a tent as opposed to them being able to lock their door at night and feel safe is monumental in somebody's life. So a lot of different things we have to do to make that happen, but I think criminalizing homelessness is the wrong answer, but building more housing is the right answer. We can do both of those things. It's going to take a lot of work, but I think we're on the right path. So I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of that question and the compassion that you expressed in asking it. Thank you.
We must make it easier, faster, and less expensive to build housing of all kinds.
It's worse than what they think. They might be underestimating how quick and how easy it's going to be to make some of the changes that are needed.
I'm signing executive order immediately following this speech, directing state agencies to review all regulations that impact housing, permitting, and construction.
They're saying all the right things, and I really appreciate that. I just don't think they understand how bad the problem.
Communications Director for the House Republican Caucus, and welcome to our Republican media availability today here on day 59 of the 60-day session. Let's go ahead and get to introductions. With us today from the House Republican Caucus, we have House Republican Leader Drew Stokesbury of the 31st District and House Republican Deputy Leader Chris Corey from the 15th District. And from the Senate Republican Caucus, we have Senate Republican Leader John Braun of the 20th District and Senate Republican Whip Keith Wagner from the 39th District. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Stokesbury for some opening remarks.
Good morning, everybody. Happy day 59 of session. I hope everyone got some sleep last night, especially those of us who stayed up all night before either participating or watching the record-setting 24-hour marathon debate over the House income tax, or over the state income tax. Not a lot left to do on the legislature's agenda. I think there's a budget coming up, a variety of other tax bills. Apparently, raising billions of dollars and a huge overhaul of the tax code is not sufficient for those addicted to taxing and spending and taking other people's money. In addition to taxing folks' income, there's two big taxes left on the docket here in the House. One to increase the B&O rate on an extremely small margin business to the point where those businesses will likely leave the state because the new B&O tax is very likely to be higher than their profit margin, and another to tax data centers, one of the industries that has made Washington State such a great place to do business and has brought so many jobs here. Democrats want to tax those apparently out of the state as well. Their imagination knows no bounds. With that, I will also mention that, like John said, Deputy Republican Leader Chris Corey is here, and I will turn it over to my Senate counterpart, Senate Republican Leader John Braun.
Well, thanks, Drew, and thanks everyone for being here. 59 days, one more day of the 2026 version of the majority's tax first strategy. I got with me today our whip, Keith Wagoner. And I just say a couple things. One, we started out this session talking about affordability as by far the biggest issue facing folks around our state, certainly around my district, I can tell you that for sure. Sadly, we're doing nothing meaningful to help folks with affordability. In fact, just the opposite, whether it's the income tax that will hit folks either directly or indirectly or eventually, I think maybe is the right term, or the budget that we haven't seen yet, but we expect to come out this morning. But when you put two bad budgets into a conference project, or a conference, you don't expect to get anything else but a bad budget coming out. And what we saw, at least on the Senate side, was a budget that wildly overspent revenues, drained the rainy day fund, drained the rainy day revenue in the future, made some very shady budget gimmicks to balance, and then maybe worst of all, assumed a very low growth rate in the out years, which while if we were in charge, I think that's terrific, but I have no confidence that the Democrats will be able to curb their spending from a 15% per biennium growth rate down to a 2.2% growth rate, which means they're setting us up next year for another record-setting deficit after 2 years of big deficits from overspending. We based on what we see right now, I think we could reasonably expect another deficit, and based on their solutions so far to these deficits, another significant increase in taxes in our future. And lastly, the income tax, I want to touch on that. I want to thank my colleagues on the other side of the rotunda for their amazing fight over the last 2 days on the income tax, really demonstrating the opposition to this bill from across the state. We saw a record sign in both the Senate and the House hearings. We've heard, I think every one of us has gotten overwhelming negative email and correspondence from our constituents. The folks of Washington have been very clear they don't want this, and in spite of all that, our Democratic colleagues are pushing this bill through at any cost and without really any regard for the will of the people. I've talked before about their willingness to cut off a referendum, which is the very best way to involve the people of the state of Washington, meaning they get a referendum, they could have a referendum in front of them that reflects the vote we take on the floor. No, the income tax would go away. Yes, it would stay. Instead, they're choosing to force likely an initiative that would confuse the voters on top of the things they put into law in recent years to confuse the voters on the financial impact and on the title. So it appears to me they simply don't trust the will of the voters. They think they know best, and they think that an income tax best, and they couldn't be more wrong. I'm going to stop right there and go to questions.
All right. First, we will go to Jerry Cornfield of Washington State Standard.
Okay, good morning. I guess my question on the transportation budget that's coming out, one of the aspects is it relies on a bond bill. House Republicans in the Transportation Committee opposed the bond bill. I guess Representative Stokesbury, do you know how many votes are needed in the chamber to pass it? And if they need any Republican votes, will there be any for that?
Thanks for the question, Jerry. Because it's would authorize new bonds, it requires a 3/5 majority vote in the House. That is 59 votes. That's exactly how many Democrats there are. So in theory, at least, House Democrats could pass this on their own. I know Chair Fye and Representative Barkis have been working pretty closely together on this. I think they've got a different vision from the Senate and from the governor. Certainly, I think everybody shares a priority in wanting to build more projects, wanting to do better at investing in maintenance and preservation for our existing highway assets. Unfortunately, there's been a couple of generations of failure by the legislature and by Department of Transportation and the governor's office that has led us to this place. I think the House Republican view is that it's unwise at this stage to begin bonding too much for maintenance and preservation. Certainly, you bond to build long-term assets, but it's often unwise to bond for simply maintenance work. And so that's been our longstanding concern. As far as I know, Democrats have not asked for any Republican votes on the bond bill. Those conversations, though, I think are still ongoing. And we haven't yet caucused on it as a whole. Certainly, our transportation lead, Andrew Barkis, has done a fantastic job, but we will see what happens when our entire caucus meets to discuss it today or tomorrow.
Did you have a follow-up, Jerry?
Looking at beyond the budget and the income tax, there are a handful of bills. You mentioned data center, but what bills do you think, or do you know at this stage, based on conversation with Democrats, are not going to advance that at this stage, you think?
I don't know if there's anything that's sort of been taken off the table. The operating budget conference committee is meeting at 10. I suspect that will clue folks in terms of what bills are assumed in the budget. I think if it's assumed in the budget, there's likely to be a lot of pressure to pass it, although just because it's assumed in the budget doesn't require its passage. Certainly with regard to the data center tax and the wholesale pharmaceutical tax, I mentioned either or both of those could not pass the legislature, and the budget would still balance. We would not be out of compliance with anything. The House moved several bills from rules to the floor calendar last night, shortly before we adjourned. I suspect those will be the priority bills to move off the floor in the next day or two by the majority, although that is a better question for them. That list is a K-12 funding bill, the two tax bills I just mentioned, the bond bill you mentioned, Jerry, another highway construction bill. There is a late-breaking bill regarding direct electric vehicle sales that would be allowed for Rivian and Lucid. There's a really bizarre bill to nickel and dime Washingtonians to help pay for abortion access, and then an electric transmission bill that the Senate failed to get out in time before cutoff, and they waved their magic wand and created a new bill that they pretended was NTIB that they're going to try to pass again today or tomorrow. So I think that's what's on the table. I know at least one of those. I don't think it currently has the votes to pass. We'll see with some of the others.
All right, next we'll go to Simone Carter of McClatchy.
Good morning. So yesterday, former Howard Schultz announced on LinkedIn that he's moving from Seattle to Miami. Although his post didn't explicitly mention the income tax that the House passed, some outlets have pointed out the timing of it and thought that that was interesting. So I was wondering if you guys could tell me what you made of that announcement.
Well, we were talking about that announcement, or not that specific announcement, but announcements like those that are going to be coming either very publicly or very quietly, with when you keep nickel and diming, taxing, and going after people. It's called capital flight. We spent 24 hours talking about why you shouldn't do things like pass income taxes when you don't need them. So I think he is just a harbinger of things to come.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the two are connected. Howard Schultz is a smart man. Wish he hadn't sold the Sonics to a Oklahoma City billionaire, but that doesn't mean he's not a smart man and doesn't know what he's doing. And yeah, this was absolutely a response to what the House did yesterday. That timing is not a coincidence. I think it took about 2.5 hours. So and yeah, like Chris said, I think this is a sign of more to come. Our offices have been inundated with companies in the last year warning us that they will begin by simply adding new jobs in other states besides Washington. You're already seeing that with companies like Microsoft and Amazon and T-Mobile. And eventually it will end with companies just entirely uprooting their headquarters here. You saw Starbucks begin that process. There are more to come. And this lies solely at the feet of House Democrats who are incapable of telling their special interest groups no, who are incapable of crafting balanced policy, who are in a race to see who can be furthest to the left. And it is going to, ironically, lead to the dismantling of the social safety net they spent a couple decades building up, because eventually we're going to run out of money to fund all of their great ideas as they continue to chase people out of the state.
Yeah, I don't see how there can be any doubt that this was related to the income tax and the many taxes that came down, that the Democrat majorities have passed over the last 8 years. And it's not the beginning. We saw Bezos leave. We saw Schweitzer move to Idaho. Ken Fisher and Clyde Holland in Southwest Washington. Ken's moved. I think Clyde's thinking about moving. McCaws, I think, have all moved. They just haven't told anybody. Nick Hanauer, champion for their side, I believe, has also moved. So the idea that they think the capital flight isn't happening is just willfully ignoring the facts directly in front of them. This is how it works. There are consequences. And to Drew's point, this is going to have a really big negative impact on a long term on our state budget, because eventually they'll have to face the facts that they can't tax their way out of their spending problem. They got to address the fact that we are overspending on our state's budget, and we have to live within our means, and we have to create an economic environment where businesses can thrive. And what's sad about it is we had that in spades not that many years ago, and year after year they've shown up with their tax-first strategy. The last 2 years have been by far the worst, but it's not the beginning, and chipped away at the economy. And I think we're headed into a deep dive. Candidly, I hope I'm wrong. I love Washington. I want it to succeed, but I think these policies are going to drive us 100% in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and if you're looking for cause and effect, don't forget to look backwards. It's not everything that's happening since this bill was debated on the floor, and if the governor's going to sign it into law, that I don't know yet. And I don't have billionaire friends, but I have a few friends who are millionaires. They have predicted this and already restructured their companies and their lives and their real estate holdings around the fact that this was coming. So those people have already taken care of their problem.
And I'll just add one thing. I mean, you're going to see this play out like the second to next day that we gavel in for the legislature. Tomorrow's the last day. Then we'll have a long interim. On the first day of next session, we will find ourselves in a multi-billion-dollar budget hole because the conference budget that's going to come out today will almost certainly leave less than $1 million in the bank for the end of the next biennium. And that does not include factoring in the collective bargaining agreements. If history is any guide, those will easily exceed $3 to $5 billion. So we're gonna pass a budget tomorrow that will leave less than $1 billion in the bank for the state, knowing that we have another $3 to $5 billion expense coming our way as soon as we gavel in next session. So imagine passing a state income tax and immediately finding yourself 3 legislative days later in a multi-billion-dollar budget hole. Washington needs change because the people in charge have shown an incapability of doing the basic job.
All right, Simone, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'll pass the baton, but thank y'all.
Okay. Next, we will go to Sarah Mises-Tan.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was curious, do you all have any thoughts on what are next steps for the millionaires tax? I know there are thoughts that there might be, they might put this on the ballot, or it might be on the ballot. But any other thoughts on what you're expecting next for this?
Well, I think it's extraordinarily likely that there'll be a legal challenge. And frankly, if the state Supreme Court cares anything about our state's constitution, that will be the end of it there. Our constitution couldn't be more clear on the definition of property. And while the argument is made that there's some mythical existence between property and non-property, our state's constitution defines it otherwise. It says everything, tangible and intangible. I don't know how there could be anything else. So if that should be the end of it. I'm not confident that will be the end of it. And then I think the next step would be a vote of the people. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, they've precluded a referendum, which would be the cleanest way to check in with the people of the state of Washington to see what they thought about this matter. Instead, they will likely force an initiative, which adds confusion to the voters, and I think the hope there is that confusion allows them to succeed in a vote they have failed at 11 times previously. So I think this still has a long road in front of it, but it is frankly sad that we got to the point we are at today.
I agree with John. I think the only other step I would add is if the Supreme Court ignores their prior holding and ignores all principles of stare decisis, and if they ignore the plain reading of the Constitution and the plain reading of the English language and come up with a political, policy-oriented, predetermined outcome, and if the Democrats rig the ballot title and have their special interest friends spend millions of dollars to defeat a voter initiative to overturn it, and if all that happens and this remains law, then the final step is Democrats will be back here lowering the $1 million exemption to tax more and more ordinary Washingtonians until eventually this does turn into an income tax on everyone. They've not been shy about that being their ultimate goal.
Yeah. And just to add, a note, Sarah, it is an income tax. It's not a millionaire's tax. The income tax is written in here to apply to everyone. It just happens to have an exemption. And or I guess I would say I know based on what I'm looking at in the underlying bill, is that's what they're planning on. They rewrote statutes on pensions so that they can put an income tax on pensions. They've done it everywhere, and they've made the mechanism to crank this down as easy as possible. And we gave them multiple opportunities yesterday to actually put the money where their claims were. We tried to get an actual statute saying you couldn't lower it below $1 million. We tried to give them a ability to put it in the Constitution lower than $1 million. They rejected it over and over and over again because the goal is not, an income tax on some, it's an income tax on all.
I'd say that the irony of not allowing this to go to the vote of the people, at every turn, the Democrats are saying, this is what people want. This is what people want. If that's true, they should happily allow it to go to the people. I think they know that it's not true, and they fear that it will fail if it goes through. And that's why they're throwing up these roadblocks to the process.
And did you have a follow-up, Sarah?
Yeah, just quickly. So I know that it was also talked about that just there aren't really any real provisions in there for the free breakfast and lunch for school children. Are you guys expecting to see, the governor has said that that will show up in the budget proposals. Are you expecting that? Have you seen that already? Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll see later today what's in there. One thing to remember that I think was kind of lost in all this debate is that I think we were already around 75% free and reduced lunch. Or free lunches, I should say, across the state. So really, this is expanding free school lunches to some of the richest school districts in the state. So I guess good job, Bob, on helping out Bellevue and Kirkland.
The other thing I would point out is just as we've seen in the last 2 years with additional investment in childcare, when it comes right down to it and they don't have the money, they'll push the limit out. And so I have no special knowledge of the budgets that are going to be released later this morning. They don't share that with the Republicans. But if If there's some funding in there for free and reduced lunch, I would virtually guarantee it's in the out years, probably 28 or 29 when they have the income tax money to spend on that. And that's a ways out and easily pushed out further when they come into next year with a big deficit. So I wouldn't hold your breath on free and reduced lunch just yet.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'm also not confident that it is something that will be funded in the current biennium. It's a promise to fund it in the future. As Chris said too, I mean, I think this is going to be yes, there are some kids for whom we should do this. The state actually and the feds actually already do provide a lot of free and reduced lunch to the folks who need it the most. I think you're going to end up throwing away a lot more food than you're going to be putting in kids' bellies. I think you're going to be giving away free food to lawyers like me and people in Bellevue and Issaquah a lot more than you're going to be giving it to people who really need it. And to say nothing of the fact about the struggling Washingtonians who don't have kids, whether it's new couples who would like to have a kid but are afraid of how expensive it's going to be in this economy, or seniors on a fixed income who are facing ever rising price increases thanks to policies enacted by this Washington that make this Washington more expensive than nearly other state. Free lunches for kids does nothing for those folks. And lastly, I anticipate that this will be in the pantheon of pie crust promises by Democrats in Olympia. Look no further than what happened with the WIA program a couple years ago. Businesses came together and asked for a modest tax increase to fund additional investment in colleges. That program, the taxes remain in place. In fact, the taxes keep going up, but the spending on college keeps getting whittled away. And Washington currently has one of the lowest college-going rates in the country, despite offering a lot of financial aid. So I fully anticipate, if history is prologue, fully anticipate that in a couple of years we'll be looking back and treating this free lunch program just like we're treating WIA now, as something to be wheeled and dealed, not a promise to be kept.
Yeah, remember what's in the intent section of the bill. It can be just about anything, all the fine promises, but if it's not in the bill itself, it's essentially meaningless. So they've kind of lit up people about all these great things that are going to come because it's, quote, in the intent section. That means nothing except perhaps when it goes to legal consideration. But if it's not in the bill itself, it doesn't exist.
All right, next we'll go to Drew Mickelson from King 5.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. During the 24-hour debate in the Democratic wings, we were hearing grumblings like this is going to put us into a special session. Some of those Republican bills won't come up. We're going to run out of time to do everything we want. You could argue this was inevitable. We knew what the final vote was going to be, plus or minus a couple. Was it worth it?
Yeah, at 100%, Drew. I mean, a couple things. I mean, first of all, the minority party does not exist to make the majority party's life more easy. The minority party's job is to represent the 3 million Washingtonians that elected us, not to roll over and bend over and sit down and lie down while the majority runs right over us and our voices and the people we represent. So I categorically reject the argument from Democrats that we should just sit down and let them do what we want. Our job is not to make their life easier. Second of all, I'm incredibly proud of what we did. Democrats brought this bill up at 6 p.m., a little before 6 p.m. on Monday. We asked them to bring it up early the next morning. We think this is an important debate. This is going to reset the tax code in the biggest way it's been in the last 100 years. We think that the people deserve to see that. We asked them to bring it up at 9 o'clock on Tuesday. They said, no, we're going to bring it up at 6 o'clock. So one of our chief aims was to make sure we didn't just go all night, but into the next day so that the people could watch this be debated in the daylight, not passed in the dark of night as House Democrats had intended. We also fundamentally believe that our constituents sent us here to do a job. I mean, and like I said, that job is not to roll over for Democrats. Our constituents want us to use every tool at our disposal to oppose things that they know will be harmful to the state and they know will eventually befall all of them. And so that's what we did. We proposed as many amendments as we could think of that would address the underlying problems with the bill. And I'm really proud that we did that. And then lastly, This process has been incredibly rushed. 60-day sessions are supposed to be supplemental sessions to deal with emerging state issues that simply cannot wait one more year. This tax doesn't take effect until 2029. It absolutely could wait one more session to be passed. Until last September or October, this was like the third rail of Washington politics. Not even normal Democrats could be seen publicly touching the idea of an income tax. All of a sudden, something happened last September or October, and there was this rush to pass it. It took capital gains tax 3 years to get passed. Look, I don't think we should ever pass an income tax in Washington, but if we're going to do it, it should be done right, and it should be done thoughtfully. That is not this. It is full of pie crust promises. There's no protection for ordinary people. It only addresses one segment of the tax code. If we're gonna fix it, we should fix it in whole, not in piecemeal sections. And we don't think that a striking amendment that was released on a Friday that had amendments required to be requested later that day, had to be proposed within put on the bar within about 48 hours, had another few hours to study them. We think that was just all too fast. And so part of our goal was to slow things down so that Democrats could continue to understand what they were voting on, could be in their seats, listening to debate, have conversations with our members behind the scenes. Once it hit the floor, we knew it was likely to pass, but we didn't want to give up or assume anything. So we also wanted to make sure we had a long debate so we could get one last chance in getting our points in and giving us a little more time to talk with our friends across the aisle to see if we could persuade any more of them. There is a bipartisan no vote. 48 members all agreed, 47 members all agreed this is a bad idea for Washington. So there is a bipartisan group who oppose this, and we were, I think, 2 votes shy of stopping it.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think giving the Democrats every opportunity to fix some of the mistakes in the underlying striker was important. I think that there was a lot of Democrats who were talking to us as we were working through some of these amendments, a little surprised by things that they thought were in there or things that they thought the bill did that the bill didn't actually do, because I think that they were not given a full briefing on the implications of this bill. I think Representative Stokesbury is right. You rush a bill in on the last 4 or 5 days of session and expect us to just roll over and let you pass it. It's a seismic shift. This is probably one of the biggest battles or the biggest changes in Washington state political history since our founding. So yeah, of course we're going to fight. Of course we're going to show every reason why you should be a no on this. And also, I think it was important to do it during the daylight. Drew, it was good to see you on the wings. It was nice to have that media table full. That doesn't happen when these bad policies are passed at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the morning. So having everybody there to see what was going on, I think, was hugely important. And yeah, this notion of, well, that's going to pass. I can't believe they're making us do that. I don't buy it for a second. If the roles were reversed, they would do it. As a matter of fact, I've seen multiple of their members cheering when Texas Democrats fled the state to stop their state from doing something. So forgive me if I don't buy this like pearl clutching about us, making their lives more difficult. They would do it in a heartbeat. They cheer when others do it. So it's part of the process. It's one of the few tools we have at our disposal. And I think for all those other reasons and for the citizens to be able to see what was at stake, I would do it again in a heartbeat. And I think all 38 of my fellow Republican House members would as well.
All right, Drew, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, sorry. Just for the senators, what can we expect when it hits the floor? I know we won't have the amendments, but will there be lengthy speeches from your caucus as well, senators?
So what we have up in front of us at some point in the next 2 days is a concurrence vote. That's a whole lot different than a full debate. It'll come for a concurrence vote and then a final vote if the concurrence vote is positive. And what you can expect is exactly everything we can do, which is at least 19 speeches on the floor of the Senate saying this is a bad idea for our economy, for the people of the state of Washington, and for our future.
And Drew, to go back to the earlier question, I spent the last about hour and a half in the House wings watching, and the importance of that was when you bring big ideas that are going to change our state, the majority should have to defend those ideas. And I heard their defenses of those ideas, and I think a lot of constituents heard those ideas. They were very weak defenses. That's important for people to hear. One that stood out to me that I heard was, well, when I heard about this bill, the first thing I did was go see if it affected me, and it didn't affect me. I thought, wow, such a shallow thought process, so short-sighted and selfish as a basis for making big policy changes. People ought to know that that's the kind of thinking going on the other side. So hearing that debate, 24 hours of it, of people trying to defend what I think is really bad policy, that's an education right there in what people are thinking. So my hat's off to the House, and particularly my seatmates. Went over and watched the end. It was pretty impressive.
All right, next we'll go to Carlene Johnson in the center square.
Thank you. Appreciate it, you guys. I hope that some of y'all got some sleep last night. I wanted to ask you, Rep. Stokes-Perry, I saw one of the most telling exchanges on the floor last night was when Rep. Fitzgibbon stood up and said that he's not a lawyer, so it wasn't up to him to know whether or not the income tax was going to be upheld constitutionally. And then you stood up and pretty strongly objected to what he said. Can you sort of restate why you took objection to his comments?
Yeah. Thanks, Carlene. I think you described Representative Fitzgibbon's comments sort of the way I took them, which was I think his point was that there's a court that's supposed to adjudicate constitutionality, and it's not the legislature's job to do that. That's certainly the logical extension of saying, well, the court's going to have the final word. So what do we know? I just think that's fundamentally wrong. Look, if he stood up there and said, this is definitely constitutional, here's all the reasons why income isn't property and why I believe this is constitutional, I think maybe I'd have a slightly different reaction. I would disagree with him, but, folks are free to have those disagreements. As I pointed out on the floor, the U.S. Supreme Court often has disagreements over matters of constitutional interpretation, and they're incredibly smart people that are trained to do only this. But there's Justice Jackson in the early 20th century had this great line in one of his decisions saying that the Supreme Court is not last because they're right. The only reason they're right is because they're last. And I think that, among other things, reminds us that we all have a role to play here. We don't all just throw up our hands and say, well, we're not lawyers, that's for the courts to decide. All three branches of government, when they take office, they swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, including us. If it wasn't our job to abide by the Constitution, and that was only the court's job, then why on earth would we have to take that oath in the first place? It makes no sense. We take the oath because it means something. It means we've got to do our best to do what we think is constitutional and avoid doing what we believe to not be constitutional. So it's one thing to have a difference of opinion, and some people think something is constitutional and some people don't. That's a sign of a healthy democracy. But to pass something to be unconstitutional based on the extremely clear direction given by the state Supreme Court, it is not a close call. If the Supreme Court upholds their 1933 decision, this tax will be dismissed 9-0. You rarely get legal constitutional questions that are more clear than this. The only way this survives constitutional scrutiny is if the Supreme Court gets rid of their 100-year-old precedent. So it's our job to follow that 100-year-old precedent. That's what's on the books. It's very clear. It is our job as a legislature to only do that which is constitutional. Under current Supreme Court precedent, this bill is plainly unconstitutional, and I think it's an abrogation of our duty and a violation of our constitutional oaths to do something that we know to be unconstitutional under current Supreme Court precedent.
Yeah, it's an extreme cop-out to use that logic. Right over my right shoulder, you can maybe see the copies that we all get of the Constitution. And it's not tricky language in there. You don't have to be an attorney. It's stated in perfectly clear, plain English. So to say, oh, that's not up to us to decide, I certainly think I understand it perfectly well.
All right. Did you have a follow-up, Carlene?
Yeah, just real quick. If any of you want to name a really bad bill that you count as a success for putting down this session, what would that be?
I think in the Senate, probably the ag unionization bill was the most important bill we stopped. that bill would have, had an enormous negative impact on a ag sector in our state that's already struggling badly because of bad policy put in place by the Democratic majority over the last few years. So I think broadly for our constituents, that was probably the biggest deal we saw in the state Senate.
Carly, I don't know if I can pick only one. I do think one exciting thing for Republicans is that for the second session in a row, we took down the new Attorney General's top 2 legislative priorities, a bill to make violation of a permit a felony. We have a slew of bills to let violent offenders like rapists and murderers out of jail early or give them a lower sentence. But at the same time, we want to send blue-collar union workers who accidentally make a mistake on the job to prison. That's pretty unacceptable for some bizarre reason. That was the Attorney General's top priority this session. We defeated that for the second session in a row. There was also a really, perhaps better intention than the environmental crimes bill, but ultimately misguided effort to severely regulate in a pretty unconstitutional way how social media companies organize their feeds and what sort of content they could provide you. That was also one of the Attorney General's top 2 priorities. And for the second year in a row, Republicans were able to negotiate to make sure that did not make it to the floor. So that's pretty great. I will take killing the top 2 bills from the Democrat Attorney General any session. We did it twice in a row. We also had a lot of wins for Washington consumers. There's a bill to slap a 10-cent per bottle tax. There's a bill to put a new tax on sugary beverages. There was a bill to severely limit the number of tires that could be sold in Washington state, which would cause tire prices to rise. A bill that would make groceries more expensive. The list goes on, and Republicans were able to kill a lot of those bills that would have made Washington even more expensive. We unfortunately didn't get a lot of traction on bills to make Washington more affordable, but we at least stopped the Democrats' bills that would have made Washington more expensive.
And I just want to thank Drew Stokesbury for taking literally all of the answers.
All right. Next, we'll go to Mitchell Rowland of the Spokesman Review.
Hi, guys. Good morning. I actually am going to turn over to my colleague Alina Perry to ask a question.
Hi, this is Alina, also from the Spokesman. I was just wondering if you guys had any thoughts on the use of Climate Commitment Act funds to supplement the budget this year, and if you feel like that's an appropriate use of those monies.
Well, I think if you, naturally, my preference is not to have Climate Commitment Act funds at all. We do. So if the choice is between it being misspent on Democrat special interests, which have resulted by OFM and Ecology's very own reports in virtually no reduction in carbon, or using it to spend for services for the people of the state of Washington, I would choose the latter. I would, if it was up to me, my first choice would be to send it back to the people of the state in some sort of tax reform. My next choice would be to spend it on some transportation need. And my next choice after that would be to help balance the operating budget to prevent additional taxes. All of those would be better than just having it doled out to special interest, as has been done the last couple of years with that money.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I don't think it's a stated use of the funds. I think we should be returning it back to the people. This, by and away, is the most regressive income tax or regressive tax that the Democrats have passed in the last few years, and it is causing, I think, net combined with our other sales taxes on gas, $1.47 a gallon in total charges when you include the Climate Commitment Act with everything else. So. It should be returned to the people, obviously, but it just goes to show that the money was never about actually reducing climate impact. It was just another Democrat slush fund.
Yeah, a year or two ago, Department of Ecology released a tool that shows which projects are funded with CCA dollars in which legislative districts. The CCA dollars in my legislative districts funded FTEs for a couple of my cities to let them hire a climate planning strategist. And it installed electric vehicle charger at an apartment complex in my district that is relatively upscale, bills itself as luxury apartment living. I'm not sure any of those are actually going to reduce carbon. I think you could light the money on fire and it would probably have about as big of an impact on carbon reduction. So I think virtually any use, up to and including lighting all the money on fire, certainly could not do less than what we're doing right now. I think that spending money on working families tax credit, which is the #1 authorized use of the CCA, is perfectly fine. That, as Chris mentioned, this is an incredibly regressive tax on Washington drivers. It makes a lot of sense to send some of that money to the transportation budget to help resolve some of our transportation challenges there. So yeah, I would be, if we can't repeal the tax, if we can't give the money back to the taxpayer, then yeah, we should invest it in things like working families tax credit or the transportation budget.
All right. Do you have a follow-up from the spokesman?
Nope, I think we're good. Thank you so much.
All right. Next, we will go to Jeff Pogula.
Sure is.
Please unmute yourself there. Yeah.
Too many buttons to press. You talk about the income tax or millionaire's tax or however you want to describe it, and you say that the Democrats keep pushing this despite the will of the Washington voters, but you also say that they've been moving in this direction with various taxes over the last several years, but at the same time, the voters keep electing the Democrats and putting them in bigger and bigger majorities. How do you reconcile those two things?
Hey, you're asking if the Democrats continue to put more taxes in place and yet the voters keep reelecting them. Well, I think that's a very complicated question. I would start by saying, if you look at the initiative process we've seen so far, you have a wild spending difference between one side and the other, and I think you have to take that into effect. The other is, I think you have to, to a certain extent, you're right. The voters have to decide if they want to continue to have the tax and spend policy they've seen over the last few years. They have every right to do that. But I also think that's why you see the Democrats billing this income tax as a millionaire's tax versus just an income tax, which is what it is. Their polls, just like our polls, show that it's wildly unpopular if it was to be placed on a broad group of folks. And we've made that case over and over that they're setting the stage. And they've been pretty clear about they're setting the stage for an expansion, but they're doing it in a way that is, candidly, politically savvy because they think they know better, they can trick the voters, and that they'll continue to elect them, or they'll get it in place before they stop electing them, and it'll be hard to undo. So, the voters ultimately get to decide. We all get the government we vote for. Right now, the people of the state of Washington are getting what they voted for. We'll see in the future whether this continued path down tax and spend sticks, or if at some point folks make different decisions in the future.
I'll echo what Senator Braun said. Certainly, the funding disparity on the initiatives a couple years ago is important. Also, don't forget that a year or two before that, Democrats passed a bill to rig these initiatives even more in their favor by creating an extra ballot title that make any initiative that would save taxpayers money, make it into a Chicken Little initiative and sound like the sky is falling. So they've certainly rigged the system in their favor. But I think it's two things are telling. One is numerous times last night during the 24-hour debate, Democrats rejected time and time again amendments that would have either required the income tax to be put on the ballot as a referendum, or at least remove the necessity clause, which would allow private individuals to rally around and collect signatures and put the income tax on the ballot as a referendum. If Democrats were so confident that this were a popular idea and this would survive public scrutiny, they should have welcomed public input because it would only affirm their claims. But I think the truth is they're very afraid of how the public is going to react, that this probably is the straw that breaks the camel's back, that this is a step too far, and this is something that would not just be overturned by the people, but cost them seats in the next November election. So they're doing all they can to avoid having this put before voters. And then the final thing I'll note is, while Democrats are winning elections, folks are voting in different ways. Folks are also voting with their feet. And the folks who are sick and tired of Democrat policies aren't voting for Republicans. They're leaving Washington state. They're leaving for Texas and Florida and Idaho and Montana and Arizona. And so I think that puts a very different lens on these election results. So Democrats are really good at winning, in part because they're really good at passing things that are so bad for Washingtonians that regular people get fed up and leave because they feel like they can't fight back and they can't survive under the boot of Democrats anymore.
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I would add this. I think that and last night's vote kind of reflects it, right? The income tax passed by 2 votes, and I can count 5 of those yes votes who wanted to be no. They are bullied, threatened, and coerced into submission. And I think it's a core group of progressives in Seattle that are doing a lot of that. And I think they are basically saying, do this or else. You look at where they are on the issues, and largely most people outside of the Seattle metro area are with Republicans on almost every issue. And they agree with on these. So I think there's communication stuff there, and I think there's a lot of voters that don't realize the amount of impact that the state has, and they're just being told on the federal level that's all they hear is the federal level, what's going on there. I think that's part of it. I think that there's again, like I mentioned earlier, there's also a lot of the information is not getting to the rank and file Democrats. They're told what leadership wants them to hear, and then they're basically told how they're going to have to vote. And I think that's really frustrating. And I wish that they would, stand up. But I get the pressures and the threats. Here's the last thing that I would share, right? And it does play back into the federal stuff, right? We heard a lot about the Trump cuts and the federal cuts to Medicaid and Medicare, and how those were part of the reason why we needed to pass taxes like this. And it's just not true. The Washington Democrats here in Olympia over the last biennium have cut Medicaid with direct cuts and then the accompanying federal match over $1 billion. And they're not at all taking responsibility for it. They're just blaming Trump. So as long as they have a red herring that they can keep throwing at the voters, they're going to do it. But I'm hopeful that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, that it's just too much for people to ignore, and that they'll start asking tough questions. And we're going to make sure that those tough questions are being asked going forward.
So they have played this cleverly and diabolically. So remember, 2 years ago, they all voted that we weren't going to have an income tax. That was clever because that affected elections. Now we're back to another place, and they played it as kind of an envy versus punishment. And you got envy because it doesn't affect you and it doesn't affect me. We'll go after that piece of it. Also very clever. If you go back a little bit further, when we had our tax structure work group that was like a 3-year, 4-year project, nobody had the stomach for an income tax at the time. You couldn't find 5 votes in the minority party for an income tax. So we went from that place to where we are today, I think, driven by just a few people in the caucus. They have dragged the rest of the majority with them, either slightly willingly or through coercion or unwillingness. And that's where we are today, because and I'll say it again, clever and diabolical.
All right, Jeff, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, briefly, for Representative Stokesbury or anyone in the House, I know we were talking yesterday during the marathon debate kind of about the procedure, and I'm not like super versed in House procedure, but why not try to stretch out the debate if the income tax is as bad as you say? Why not continue to stretch out the debate, force a special session, and bring even more attention to it?
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the beginning in response to another question that Democrats said that they wanted to start running the bill on Monday. We asked them to wait until Tuesday morning. I think part of why they wanted to make sure they started Monday was to avoid that risk. But again, there's a couple of things that limited us. One is there was about 60-something amendments. And that's a lot of amendments. There's very few bills that ever have more amendments than that, especially by the time it hits the floor. The rules allow the speaker to set an amendment deadline. It was set pretty early on Friday after the striking amendment hit the bar. So there, practically speaking, there just was not a lot of time to add a lot more amendments than that. But then the real limiting factor is on any given amendment or on final passage, each member can only speak for up to 3 minutes at a time. And that 3 minutes is sort of cumulative across the entire question before the body, whether it's an amendment or final passage. So, once there's a number of amendments set, you got your number of members set, that automatically puts a ceiling on the amount of time you can spend. I think even if we had all 39 members speak on every amendment, they can still only go for 3 minutes. You still can't completely run out the clock. The strategy wasn't to run out the clock. I think that would have been fun. I don't think it would have been possible, even if it happened. As you saw, there were 51 votes by the Democrats to support it. I think they would just reconvene in a special session. The governor really likes this current version of the income tax. I think he would immediately call us back. So, I think that would have only delayed the inevitable. I think the important part for us was to make sure that Republicans did as good of a job as we could representing our constituents, speaking for as long as we did. I mean, Jeff, the state's 132 years old. Nobody has ever done a 24-hour debate. I think that the longest debate we can find is about 11 hours. So, we more than doubled the longest debate in known history. That is no small feat. Our members were tired, but every time a new amendment came up, they were re-energized to explain why that amendment highlighted a problem with the income tax. And I think we accomplished our goal. I think we showed Washington voters who's on their side. We stretched the debate into the daylight so Democrats could not pass it in the dark of night. And we did all we could to persuade enough Democrats to vote with us to save Washington. Unfortunately, they voted with their special interest donors, but this is not the last. This is not the last of it. The fight will go on, and I think you'll see that Republicans have only just begun to fight.
All right. With that, we will go to closing remarks, starting with Representative Stokesbury.
Well, thanks you all. Thanks for joining us. I know it was a very late night 2 nights ago, and so I appreciate everybody who was able to wake up and watch this and participate as well. I think this is our last one of the session, barring a special session, I suppose. But want to thank all of you here on Zoom today for your coverage of what we're doing in Olympia. It really matters. I want to thank everybody watching on TVW for paying attention. I think when folks are educated, we get better outcomes. The last point I wanted to make, I should have made this at the beginning, but like I said, we were up late the night before. This is also the first time we've had one of these availabilities since opposite house cutoff, and I just wanted to point out how successful House Republicans were in opposite house cutoff before that gets forgotten based on the 24-hour debate we had earlier this week. But Republicans killed 54% of the bills that the Senate sent over to the House. Only 104 bills passed the House. That is the lowest number since 2014. 2014, you will recall, was when Republicans controlled the state Senate. So, of course, it makes sense that the Democrat House would not pass very many Senate Republican bills. But even then, we still only passed 4 more bills than the Democrat House passed from the Senate Republican bills back in 2014. All told, we'll see how many bills pass these last couple days. But I bet you that we will almost certainly adjourn the 2026 session having passed fewer bills off the House floor than any other session in at least the last 15 years, probably a lot longer than that, which I think really shows the public how hard House Republicans are down here fighting for them. So thanks again, you guys.
And it looks like Senator Braun is off the call. So yes, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And that's the end of our event. Thank you.
Thank you.